Welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening it is our pleasure to welcome Dr. Angela Celeste May, our clinical, our organizational, our forensic psychologist. She's all of that, but she's also a musician and an author. Welcome, Dr. Angela Celeste May. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's always fantastic being on your show with you. And I'm doing great. I'm doing very well, very blessed. Even with everything that's going on around.
I know.
I am doing well.
Well, good.
Yes.
So let's get to it. Our topic tonight is the weaponization of Black and brown skin. So,
Yes.
I sound like a broken record. 2020 started off with COVID-19, and I was like, oh. And what did we see? Black and brown people getting sick in great numbers, dying.
Yes. Yep.
Leadership at the top was like, oh, it's just impacting them.
Mhm.
We're not making this a national,
Them.
right, them. We're not
Mhm.
making this a national emergency.
Mhm.
We're not going to give funds. We're not shutting things down until it became a pandemic. And then it was like the world went into a panic. I mean, we saw it overseas and we knew it was coming our way. We just didn't know when.
Yep.
Then we saw Ahmaud Arbery gunned down on video, disturbing, and we were outraged. We watched George Floyd agonizing. I don't even remember how many seconds, but watching him literally die on film, outrage. Breonna Taylor, a few weeks later, killed in her home, doing something as ordinary as Botham Jean. I'm in my house.
Mhm.
Botham Jean was in his house, I believe it was a Friday night, eating ice cream on his couch, not bothering anybody, probably binging Netflix like many of us do. Breonna Taylor was at home in bed, as they said, watching TV with her boyfriend. How many of us do something so ordinary?
Mhm.
And we saw outrage break out across the country. We saw it break
Yeah.
out globally. We have since come upon our election. Not that our election wasn't going on, but it has jumped. It feels like warp speed. And I'm going to use that because, I'm a sci fi uh,
Yes. Yeah.
lover. And so I'm going
Yes.
to take a moment from Star Trek and use a term called warp speed. And last night, I don't know if you got a chance to watch. They call it a debate. It was sort of like a slugfest to me with a bully on the playground. And, the other guy was trying to hold his own and he was like, look, you're not going to talk to me like that, you clown. And,
Mhm.
it was comical, but it was sad. And
Painful. Yeah.
it was painful.
Mhm.
And when Trump was asked about law and order, he went into this whole thing about chaos. When he was asked about denouncing white supremacy, he said, well, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, all of that is a left wing extremist group. But when
Mhm.
they asked him to denounce white supremacy, he said, well, Proud Boys, stand down, but stay ready. And I thought, wow, this is the America where just a few weeks ago, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back.
Mhm.
And we're talking about justice for our Black brothers and sisters, criminal justice reform, justice when you get pulled over by police, that you want to be treated fairly and equitably.
That's right. Hmm.
And I don't know about you, but all of that goes into the weaponization of Black and brown skin. What is it
Absolutely.
about our skin color that makes everyone afraid of us? Like it's a gun. I don't understand.
That is exactly the way you put it. Like it's a gun. Exactly. Um, what maybe really want to address this, obviously, with everything that's going on right now, and for us, it's been going on. It's not new. but it's being seen now, which in some ways is a good thing because people are finding out, no, these are not individual incidents like people think. But one thing we all hear people say, you know, Black and white folks will say, you know, black and white is a term, of course, we know we're much more diverse than just that. But what people will say is, why do they bother her or him? That person didn't even have a weapon. And I always think the same thing. Yes, they did. They don't have to have a weapon because the skin, the black and brown skin and the blackness, as Nina Simone said, the blackness.
Yeah.
It's an excellent question. It's very, I'll put it this way. It's like I used to say when I was working as a forensic examiner at the Third Circuit Court in Detroit. I used to say, people would ask me, you know, because I was, you know, had gotten really good pretty quickly at assessing people and really getting an idea of what direction to make recommendations for the court and stuff. And people ask me, you know, how can you hone in as quickly as I did? Because my colleagues were very good also. But one thing I always would say is, I never assumed that couldn't be me. And I basically was saying, I would also add and was basically saying, had I been, you know, once you look at their file, their background, some of these stories what people have gone through, it doesn't excuse it, but it's kind of like, well, of course they became, you know, a murderer. I mean, because of course they did kind of thing. And so I mentioned that to say, part of my answer to how do we get here is, well, why wouldn't we be here? I mean, of course we're here. So let's just go back. Let's go back in time. I remember a couple of years ago, you know, I'm a museum you know, came from a museum family, the kids go to museum. So my brother and sister and I we hadn't been to the museum, you know, just like the three of us hang out, you know, for a while. So a couple of years ago, we went to this really cool exhibit at the Detroit Institute of Arts, DIA.
Okay.
And it had to do with following the cultural changes of the cocoa industry, actually, cocoa and coffee. It was from the Spaniards and blah, blah. And one of the things that struck me was they weren't talking about it overtly, but in the paintings, and they did kind of talk about it a little bit. In the paintings, we're talking about, you know, the Spanish, you know, with the 1600s into the 1500s, you know, just go way back. Consistently depicting the brown-skinned person as the servant, the brown-skinned person as the brute, the black or brown skin, you know. Now, you, of course, depending on what country, what culture, what time you looked at, you would see the occasional, and this is European life, of course, we're talking about, black or brown person as, you know, lady of the manor, very rare, queen maybe, or very, very rare. But basically, that was very typical. Who is back behind you taking care of the sheep, taking care of the dogs, while you know, the lighter skinned person. So it struck me, not because it was new so much, but it just really, you know, like as I have encouraged people to do, if you ever get a chance, travel.
Yes.
I've been blessed to see a lot of the world, a lot more I would love to see, but when you step outside of the bounds of our country and you get a broader perspective, some things are different than you may have thought. You see yourself differently, but some things are very consistent.
Right.
And that those depictions of Black people, and we say skin, but we know we mean the whole package, the lips and the hair and all of that. Like Malcolm X said, you know, when he was, you know, in jail, in prison, because on his way to becoming Malcolm X, and reading through the dictionary and began to see, wait a minute, going through this everything negative is Black, you know, Black and dark and everything. So psychologically speaking, to answer the question, you know, how they say first impressions are very powerful. And no matter how much you get to know a person over time or a group of people or whatever, our tendency, ideas can definitely be changed, but it becomes very hard. The tendency psychologically is to hold on to that first impression. So if you think in terms of a child, for example, and that child, let's just say that child's first exposure to a black face, a brown face is in some of those paintings or in the media or in the nonverbals. You may not say it's just the way, like your voice inflection. There's one thing to say, oh, there was this black lady, or she was black. There's all of that. So if just this on the minimal level, if we think of our five senses, taste, and touch, smell, sight, and hearing, of the five senses, psychologists have found, and other social scientists, that what we see is a very powerful one of the most powerful. What we smell also stays with us, is tied to memory. But what we see really is has a powerful impact on our psychology and the way we perceive the world.
Okay.
So you add what you see over generation after generation after generation. You add what you hear, the way things are spoken of in the family, at church, in the media, all those things. It becomes, it creates a picture that makes it pretty clear. Well, of course. I mean, to a certain degree, of course. And that doesn't mean that's what everyone thinks by any means, of course. But it's all, when you step back, I think, and look at it in those ways, it's all around us. It has been for literally hundreds of years. And there's reasons for that. So a couple of the reasons are, number one, fear.
Yeah.
If people, that's part of our psychology, it's part of the human nature, I think, to survive, to protect yourself, to protect your loved ones. So something that's different than me, different than I'm used to, feels threatening at first. Not for every single person, but generally speaking. So if that, how we say, we're the otherness, as in this country, as 10 to 12% of the population on any given year, we are consistently othered, like the other. So there's the fear of the other. I'm not sure what to make of. So when we have that vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum, as they say in science, nature of, So if there's that vacuum, I'm not sure what to make of this person, or I've never really had interactions with her. So what's it filled with? There's lots of information around us to help fill in that void, what you see on TV,
Yeah.
Now, does that mean there aren't positive depictions? No, there are some positive depictions also. But by and large, we know historically to equate brown and black skin and features and all that with exotic, unusual, and otherness can be anxiety produced. Doesn't have to be, but it can be anxiety producing anyway. So then anxiety, and what do we do when we get anxious? You kind of want to protect.
Yeah.
And that pushes a person away even more so, rather than embracing to say, well, let me get to know. And a lot of people will do this too, which more of us need to. Well, I'm not familiar with, so let me get to know. That's what we need to do. So fear is one reason. Fear is definitely one reason. Another reason is economics, the history of economics and black and brown skin. Oftentimes when I hear people say, and I'm sure you've heard it too, these arguments, I partly because I am a public figure, but even in a lot of ways, but even if I wasn't, just being a responsible citizen, being a psychologist or whatever, you don't want to just for sanity. It's not healthy to just, dive into every debate and argue social media. It's not. Forget your status. Forget all that. Forget I even said that. It's just not healthy.
Right.
You know how it is. You just have to pick your battles.
Yes.
And insert some wisdom, like you were mentioning before. So every now and let's. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just thought I'd yank that out while I was talking. But when I do dive in, sorry about that. When I do dive in, I really try to make it as objectively, factually sound and in a kind way as possible. And what I find is that people typically don't come after me. You know, now we know you could be as sane as anything and people will still try to argue, you don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll try to argue the point by saying, I understand why you may view this, but, you know, a lot of people aren't aware that perhaps, you know, etc. So every once in a blue moon, if I do kind of jump in, I'll, you know, and put some things that you know this, you feel compelled to, like I just must. I just must share some factual, you know, to help people because there are a lot of notions out there, of course. One of those conversations that comes up has to do with, you know, whenever you see a documentary or a movie or a discussion about slavery in general, and of course, particularly the chattel slavery that America has unfortunately had, you know, our history.
Yeah.
And people will say, Black and white folks, you know, will say sometimes, you know, people try to argue this and that, but it was just economics. It's just economics and prejudice, and you know, people having racist problems with Black people. That's just got nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
I've heard that.
And I just
heard
that. Like, oh, okay.
Okay. So one of the things I will say, I have said, you know, is in many instances, that's how it started. You know, it's hard to resist the temptation of free money. I get to pocket all these profits. I ain't got to pay nobody. You know, just like kind of give them some roof, if that little shed, and that's a temptation. So I will agree that historically, it, you know, of course, there's a financial component as a starting point. But in order to maintain that, see, people start asking questions.
Yes.
People in power start asking questions. In our case, now the North was not perfect, but there were some white folks in the North. There were European friends and allies reading our newspapers. You know, people start asking questions. So in order to maintain the institution of slavery, you had to kind of create some mythology. You had to get the propaganda together. You needed to, you know, kind of. So yes, it may have started with financial gain, not good, greed, and all the rest. But to maintain it over literally decades that turned into hundreds of years.
Yes.
You had to create some. They're barbarians. They're not fully human. They like it. They need our guidance. This is our Christian duty. Just you know, to the point where it permeated and continues to permeate not only our cultural understanding of each other, because we're all Americans,
right?
How we see ourselves, how others see us. So it permeates the cultural perceptions, the psychology and the thinking, which you have to actually actively work against because it's all around us. And it permeates, you know, that mythology. We carry it with you. So there's the fear factor, there's the financial gain reason. There are multiple reasons that, and then of course, in order to continue to maintain this is what we're seeing going on right now. Very dangerous time, of course, as we've talked about. If we need to legislate a few things, then we're just going to put some things into law to maintain this. So from the legal perspective, from the medical, if I would say from the medical perspective, I did a workshop. I did a little seminar at the Michigan School for Psychology. It was professional psychology, which is my alma mater. But I went back and I did I spoke in February at the end of Black History Month. And I was talking about, they asked me to speak about really talking to students and other folks, you know, faculty, different people attended about this idea of how clinicians and people who work with African American, particularly, and people of color, what they need to be informed about in working with these various populations and stuff. And one of the things I talked about is the historic, as you know, Kim, suspicion.
Yes.
Plural suspicions.
Yes.
That Black folks in particular have had in terms of the scientific community. That does not come out of a vacuum.
Right.
Now sometimes, yes, it is to our detriment, unfortunately. out of caution and being nervous to participate in certain things of a scientific nature and all the rest, and even just basic medical attention, um, we can harm ourselves by running from that. But that has historical basis as well. We know that we have been experimented on, unbeknownst to us, some of the strongest ethical rules and regulations in place in order for people in those professions to maintain their licenses came out of the mistreatment of specifically Black folks.
Yep.
And Black and brown people. So there is even in the scientific community, and I'm also thinking about some of the research from a few years back, showing the shape of the, we're always being studied, the shape of the Black head, and it's just you're just inferior mentally for just many reasons. Just your body's inferior, all that. So I maintain and tell people that we are fabulous, always have been fabulous in so many things. Every culture, every person God has created is all God's children are beautiful. Yes. We all have gifts and everything. But that is true. But our hair is copied, our tans are copied, our natural tans are copied, our music is, and so we're just absolutely fantabulous. And so many people celebrate our fantabulousness with us. And some people are threatened by that. Yes. So there's all of that. And then I'll just add one other thing, and that is, I recommended the book Black Like Me, that book. Yeah. And in it, the gentleman, the book is about a white journalist who literally goes undercover as a Black man in the 50s. I mean, he went deep into Jim Crow South, and documented the changes, just the way he was treated, all of that. He was very open and frank with all of that. And he was award-winning for doing that. Lost a lot of his white friends and neighbors, unfortunately, a lot of folks, but in his doing and using himself as this guinea pig, going and like seeing for himself how people would have treat Black folks. One of the things he talked about was this, again, it's like a trope or the mythology, again, a lot of mythology around it, of these, there's this, some have called it white guilt. Some white folks have called it white guilt, having this legacy, unfortunately. All white folks didn't participate, of course not, but having that as, that painful part of the background, which is not that far back. In his book, he talked about seeing, whenever you saw, or folks saw groups, you don't want to get two or more gathered of Black folk, brown folks, because the fear, again, these are generalizations, but the fear can be they're coming to get us. Yes. Now, why are we always coming to get? We are minding our own business. We have our own stuff to do. Why are we always coming to get folks? Some of that has to do with fear of retribution, of some things that have gone out to the other that may be coming back. So it's just from the scientific community to the financial sector to legalities to the art world. It is interwoven, the mythologies, plural, around us. And so then here we are today. So you get your Breonna and you get your, George Floyd's and your different, this is a menace.
It is.
This is dangerous. You got to take, what I mean is, this is a menace.
Yes.
It's seen as a threat. I got to take this down.
Right.
And it is not always conscious. It's not, psychologists talk about how we take information in and hold on to it on both a conscious and a subconscious level. A lot of people who do not consider themselves prejudiced and, would be horrified if they thought of themselves as treating people any differently or in unfair ways. When faced with perhaps a dark gentleman in front of them, they grab the personal more, or or kind of react. And people, for those who are able to, have been honest and said, I hate that I reacted that way. It's just ingrained.
It is. It
It's
is.
just it's ingrained. So it takes conscious work, opening our mouth, acknowledging this is, and we're the it's like, any cultural shift.
Mhm.
There are the good parts, there's the dangerous bad parts. I think that where we are right now, I've never seen so, as people have been saying, as we've said, such a diverse, it's not like we've never had diversity in fighting for civil rights for everyone, but like, wow, like such a
Yeah.
diversity of folks taking it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, kind of getting to a moment where some of that is not about the other entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Some of uh, this is about all of us, and I take it, if I'm not Black, I take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's necessary to start to get to the other side
Mm-hmm.
of this other dangerous, got to take them down, got to
Right.
stop.
Right. So I want to go back and touch on a couple of things because you brought up some great arguments. So we hear economics, and people do say that because I've been in those conversations where people say, "Oh, it was just economic." But then I always go back to, "But you justified it." Well, Kim, that wasn't me. That wasn't anybody in my family. We didn't have anything to do with that. So, I shouldn't be penalized for that. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but we're not asking you specifically to pay for the sins. We're asking
Mhm.
for the nation to. And
Right.
in addition to that, I always tell people, think about, and I know one of the most famous cases that we have is Henrietta Lacks. There's a book, you
Yes.
know,
I have it over here. It's
yes,
over here.
I have it
Yes.
too.
We have it.
And,
We have
and
the book.
right, and they have done research for years on her genetic material.
Yes.
And if you
Industries built.
yeah,
$1 billion drug industry built on her.
yes, but not only that, let's talk about gynecology. Let's talk, okay, see, let's talk about how a whole medical industry and profession was built on the back of Black women
Absolutely.
with no anesthesia,
Absolutely.
just doing all kinds of things to us to see, which continues today to perpetuate itself. Because as we
Mm-hmm.
were talking earlier, when we talk about infant mortality, or
Yes.
I'm sorry, excuse me, maternal
Oh.
mortality.
Mhm.
When we talk about maternal, because infant mortality is high too in black women, but maternal mortality is also high in Black women, and it is risen to the point where it's actually become of epidemic proportions in the United States, where it's been called out to say you are an industrialized nation, you're a wealthy nation,
Absolutely. Mhm.
why are women dying from giving childbirth? Now, childbirth is dangerous in itself. You're bringing
Absolutely.
another life. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So we're not saying that. However,
Mhm.
there are some things that are missed because of the perception. And I always, when people bring up this, I always say, what did Serena Williams say? They didn't listen to me. They wouldn't
Mhm.
listen to me. This is
Mhm.
a professional athlete, billionaire,
Mhm.
globally recognized. And here she is in one of the most vulnerable times in her life,
Mhm.
giving birth. And she understands her medical history because she said, I get clots. I know what it is. I know what it feels like. It didn't
Mhm.
feel right. And they didn't take me seriously. And what would have happened had her husband, who's not Black, not advocated for her?
Yeah.
It, it,
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling. So when
It is.
so when we go back and all the things that you're talking about, whether it's economics, whether it's
Mhm.
fear, whether it's unconscious or conscious, these are things that still impact us today.
Absolutely. Permeates.
Yeah,
Permeates. It
every
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish your.
I was just going to say, and to that point, like going back to what you were saying
Mhm.
about how people will say, well, that wasn't me,
Mhm.
wasn't my family. I've heard this response, and I think it's absolutely on point. It may not have been you or even your family personally, but as long as you are benefiting from the rape,
Yeah.
the thieving, you name it, the laws in place specifically to make sure that we don't get housing or all the rest,
Mhm.
then that imbalance remains.
Mhm.
And there is, it's not doing a favor, it's owed. Like you said, that the country needs to, yeah, you know, come to some, rectify this. Um, I was in South Africa as a doctorate student. The last seminar that I took, during my doctorate program, you had to take, I think, 3 to 4 seminars, and you could choose which ones, you want to take. So I was definitely taking advantage of this. I'm going to South Africa. It was fantastic. It was actually an education seminar. And you travel with a university or school, you have more access than you might normally as a tourist. So that was fantastic. So we saw everything from, we were in Soweto and the shanty towns, and didn't speak a word of the language, but the people were so beautiful. It's like they wanted to show us their homes, their houses, no matter how small, or all the way to the ANC, the African National Congress. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And at the time, that was when the reconciliation, committees and stuff were going on, where, because they hadn't been that long out of apartheid. And, thank goodness for Nelson Mandela, as their leader at that time, as the president, and those working with him who understood the need and the necessity to acknowledge, take responsibility, forgive it, and come together to move forward. Otherwise, you're not going to have a country, in terms of break apart. So that reconciliation, that process is something that we may be number one in many ways. America's the number one this, number that, but we are woefully behind, which is why we see what we see today. It's ongoing because we've spent, people will say that I just, find very frustrating. I'm sure you do too. They act like, well, but slavery is over.
Yes.
Like, like that was the end of it. And people just wandered into the sunset with their bags of riches. It's like,
it's all good.
Okay. Jim Crow laws, one thing after another. So, and I want to do this research too, because, it's all about the same kind of thing. We know about Rosewood? Yeah, we're learning about some more of those, but a project I would love to do, or love for someone to do, is I want to see all that put together in one, if it hasn't been done, one document, one book, to show just the number of times, the breadth of the vehemence to fight against Black wealth.
Yes.
It's not just keeping it from Black folks, but when Black folks attain it. And yes, young people, we have history. We've always had Black wealthy. We've always had Black well off. We've always, folks who did, we've always had those who built it up, who did their work, worked the land. But just continuously, consistently torn down, burned down, reconstruction, stripped away, just, so it's been active, an active fight against the Black and brown people of this country attaining really full citizenship, and to be able to take advantage of all that it means to be American. Because I've heard it said, and I've repeated this too, I don't think, you would never want to question people's patriotism. And we're all, if we're all Americans, we're all Americans. But I've heard it said that no one's more American than African Americans, and that's just, because we've shed blood since we fought in every war.
Mm-hmm.
Revolutionary War, Buffalo Soldiers, all that, for a
Mm-hmm.
country that did not love us back,
Exactly.
and continue to maintain that love.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, not want don't want to, like, compare patriotism, but I think that's true patriotism and true love of
Mm-hmm.
a country that continues to struggle with the basics. The
Yes.
basics. We're still talking about voting.
Yes.
We're still, oh, and that's another thing. That's another thing. Um, I, if you've heard people say, in terms of where we are today and how we get there, and people are, every primary, definitely the quote unquote major uh, presidential elections, every 4 years. Obviously, this is the most consequential. But we're always, people are always encouraging each other to vote. Wonderful. I do the same. I know you do.
Mm-hmm.
Telling folks to vote. One of the consequences, as people say, of not having those civics classes, social studies, and political studies and stuff in school, like we used to,
Mm-hmm.
is we're getting one or two more generations of folks who have
Yes.
lost that understanding
Yes.
of what the process is. And I think one of the most important things that's not getting across, now some of these real young ones, they're getting it. They're
Mhm.
like, when can I vote?
Right.
Shoot, I'm 17. I want to be, so it's good. That's wonderful. But for folks of all backgrounds who are, well, I don't know if it makes a difference, blah blah blah. I'm gonna sit this one out, and etc. We're always looking at the elected officials and talking about what you need to do and what I want to see them do. And that's wonderful. That's a part of being a citizen in a democracy. But we need to say this plainly. You citizens have a job. Do
Mm-hmm.
your job. You're telling so and so on Capitol Hill to do their job. Cool. You have that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we have at least in a democracy. Now it's different in a dictatorship, perhaps.
Yeah.
But in democracy, the democracy is everybody's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with encouraging each other, but man, this is like one of my little pet peeves. Why are we begging and pleading? Get up at this. It's your job.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's what that's your responsibility. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, assuming you want to keep your rights. Now, if you don't, you have nothing to complain about. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to put it forward, in that manner. And I have to say, a lot of these young ones coming up, they're getting that. They're like, let me at it. Let me let me
Yeah.
at the vote. It's our job. And it's cliche. Elections have consequences. They do.
Mhm.
Um, it, I'm definitely a proponent of the idea that no, President Abraham Lincoln did not just fling open the doors and just free. We worked towards that, and worked and
Mhm.
fought and died. We're all lobbied, all the rest. So we did it as a country, but certainly having that particular president in office at that time, we weren't allowed to vote, of course, but the voting public. That opened the way to
Mhm.
finally let that take place.
Mhm.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and may we speak of Eleanor Roosevelt?
Yes.
Sister girl got in the cockpit with the black Tuskegee Airmen because she
Mhm.
understood what that visual is. There's so much psychology around the abuse of black and brown bodies. Again,
Mhm.
it goes back to that. She understood seeing the first lady saying, these people need to be respected, goes a
Exactly.
long way.
Mhm.
The Kennedys, you can just go up
Mhm.
to our wonderful Barack Obama. So yeah, elections have consequences, and direct consequences on black and brown lives and bodies, medical care, and everything else.
It absolutely.
Everything else. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about women in leading, but before we get to
Yes.
that, I want to ask you a particular question, and I saved this question just for you
Uh,
because I
okay.
know that psychologically you could break this down for us.
I'll
So
try.
we have seen it where when African Americans, Black Americans are killed, there's a settlement, and they seem to be increasing. I want to say Mike Brown, I think they gave his family, it was between 4 and 6 million, something like that. And then with Breonna Taylor, it was 12 million. And then I read a couple of days ago in Maryland, they gave another person $20 million. See, to me, the thought is, and maybe I'm incorrect, and if I am, tell me, Dr. Angela Celeste May,
Okay.
why is it so easy for you to write a check, but we aren't able to legislate or manage the, I don't even want to say expectations, but manage our police force, make them
Mhm.
understand that this is not acceptable. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. And I was actually reading about this today. I think it's right along the lines of what you're asking, what you're talking about. I'm so glad you raised this, because I do think it kind of gets by a lot of folks. It's a very, very important point. It either gets by a lot of folks, or when people read about it, they'll be like, "Oh man, I wish they had, pushed it into the jury box, blah blah," and then we kind of like, and then go on.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so you're absolutely, we need to not go on and look at this. What I was reading about today, and kind of preparing for the conversation today, and just kind of like perusing of some of the latest research on some things. And there was a phrase I saw in an article I was looking at, and I was like, oh, that just, so true. Hits right on the money. We know this. Um, it can be, and it wasn't about writing the check so much like you're talking about, but it really goes to the heart of it. And what I was reading about had to do with, again, our perceptions, our psychology, and that first impression thing I was talking about earlier. um, it can be, uh, even though it's 20 million, even though it's like, like you're saying, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. The harder thing for folks a lot of times is acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
In order to not write the check, and push it into the court system, let it be, litigated and all the rest. And that, what does that actually mean? It
Mm-hmm.
means you have to expose some things. You have to admit some things. You have to acknowledge some things. And then you have to actually do the hard work of changing some things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one part of that answer has to do with the protectiveness of, uh, the image, protecting the image. And that sounds superficial, like all that money for an image. But when I say image, I'm talking about identification, like how I identify myself, how we identify our police, it's a cultural identification. And
Yeah.
that's very hard. It's not impossible, but that can be very hard to change, very hard to address, it can be painful. It exposes all kinds of ugliness, all of that stuff, which is what we need to do to make these changes.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Rather than all the settle, 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 we do need to go through the painful process. Otherwise, the more painful things of loss of life and all the rest will continue to happen as it is happening. But it has to do, when you think of a cultural identity, and by culture, I'm also referring to, there's a very strong policing identity, for the jurisdictions and the what am I trying to say? The municipalities, the
Mm-hmm.
city, the state, for whomever it falls under, whatever state, wherever or city. There's that whole identity, the way they identify themselves. So I would just say that, how hard it is for an individual to change her or his personality. Like, how do you change? It's just it's possible, but it's
Mm-hmm.
ingrained. Um, that is akin to what we're asking folks to do, whether they are conscious of it or not. And that's one of the reasons they're like, just, let's just make it go away. And I will promise to do better.
Right.
Not acceptable, not enough. The ugliness needs to be brought out because we're looking at it
Mm-hmm.
and suffering from it. So,
Absolutely. Great point. So we have a few more minutes, but I've got to get
okay.
to our women leading the conversation. So
Yes.
we know that Trump said that he wanted to get rid of diversity training, that it mocks the nation, it takes away from our core values, it's despicable, it's not patriotic. And it's funny because you said something earlier that struck me, and it took me back to a memory of when I was working in corporate. And one of those things was, you said, well, if two or three are gathered, people look. And we have carried that over into corporate, nonprofit, education, medical. You see that, and we hear that among professional Black people. You
Mhm.
know, you keep your relationships the way they are professional at work. However, you can't have, if it's a mixture and there are five of you, all five of you aren't going to go to lunch together because there will be this expect they're plotting. What are
Right.
we plotting? We're just going to lunch. We all happen to have the same lunch hour, or this is the time in our schedule, and
Exactly.
we're all going to have corned beef sandwiches because we all like corned beef sandwich, whatever it is. And
Why corned beef though? Why the hell
like,
corned beef?
I know I like corned beef, so it must be something bad. But we can laugh about it. But as you said, it's based historically.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we're seeing are Black women that are having conversations about microaggressions, about
Yes,
racism in the workplace, about bullying, about harassment. And it all stems from a bias. You wear,
absolutely.
you wear your hair natural, I wear my hair natural. At times when I wear it naturally curly, people are like, "Oh, there's a different attitude towards me." When I press it or flat iron it and it's straight, there's another. Oh, well, what are you? Are you? And I've had that conversation so many times where I've had people ask me, and I just laugh. I'm Black. I'm African American. I've never seen a Black person with long hair before, and I go, "Did you just say that to me?" Like, okay, I can't, because
They don't even know they've seen it.
they don't even know, and they're like, "Well, I didn't think." And I've heard this. Black people, all the Black people I know, they don't grow hair like yours.
Right,
I'm
right.
like, we do have long hair. Every woman in my family has long, long hair. But I say that to say we see the imagery in movies and television when you talked about imagery and how it's important. And we see it in the media, whether it's news, cable news, or even
Mhm.
podcast, television programming. We see Black women at the forefront. What
Mhm.
do you attribute that rise to?
Well, setting aside that women are fabulous, fantabulous, and Black women are amazing. That these women that we see earned it. They're smart. They're brilliant. They have something to say. They have something of value to say, and they've always been on the front lines and should have the mic and the spotlight because they have so much value to contribute. Setting all that aside, which is all true. I don't want to say set it aside. Honoring that. Let's
Yes.
say that. Honoring all of that. To add to that, that's all good and wonderful, which it really is. But there is a slight that my hypothesis, my kind of like idea about this. I had about 15 years, 20 years, 15, 10 years ago, whatever. I was actually talking to my husband about it, and I said, you know what? It was longer than 10 years, maybe 15 years. And I said, this it's wonderful. It's wonderful we're seeing more. But
Mhm.
there's a sexism attached to that.
Yes.
And the sexism is she, oh, she's less threatening. She's
Mhm.
not as bad because, she's a woman.
Mhm.
Where Black men and brown men may, now it's a double-edged kind of thing. On the one hand, like people have said, as much as we love President Barack Obama, the question going in, back in the day when it was Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, is the country ready for a woman? Is the country ready for a Black man? His
Mhm.
maleness,
Yes.
kind of, people have said help push him to the forefront because, yes, it's about way past time to have a Black president, but we're not ready for a woman yet. That speaks to the sexism.
Mhm.
Um, so my idea is it is fantastic to see all these Black women, but we have more of those voices oftentimes than Black. This is not the only reason, but the sexism part of it is that women are considered less threatening.
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. And that part of it is negating the power
Mm-hmm.
and the assumptions of power that Black women have always had, always had. And so, because of the sexist assumptions about the less power that women and Black women have, and that's in one sense.
Mm-hmm.
The Oprah Winfrey is like and Michelle Obama. That's the quintessential like auntie,
Mm-hmm.
where that auntie has a certain kind of societal power
Mm-hmm.
because Black women historically have raised white babies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part also, that relationship where there's a comfort level. There's
Mm-hmm.
a bit of a comfort. It's kind of complicated. It's a bit of a comfort level because Black women have always been in the presence of all kinds of different folks in their lives weaved in, and so there's a comfort level for that. But there's also the quote unquote comfort level because she's not going to be as threatening to me as a man would be.
Right.
Thus, it's all negative, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but thus more Black male bodies are being stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
have always been women who were lynched,
Mm-hmm.
as but and I don't know the statistics or whatever that it is, but we tend to think or believe that more Black men than women,
Mm-hmm.
even though definitely women had absolutely been lynched. And I don't want to put numbers out there. I don't know, but yeah, that part negates all that we have to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a reverse sexism. It's just plain sexism because then it puts Black men down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like all of that. It's
Mm-hmm.
all of that. But I love seeing it. I want to see more Black women. But I want to see more men of color joining that. They're there. It's not like they don't exist. They're there. It's fantastic. You highlight them, which is wonderful. But yeah, there's some sexism in that. Well, we're a little less threatened by her because she's a she.
Right.
So that's not so great. But I love seeing us.
Exactly. I do too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When Michelle Obama comes out and she speaks advice, or when we had the Democratic National Convention, everyone tuned in because we all wanted to hear
Everyone.
what Michelle had to say, and we all were in
That's
rap
right.
like, Michelle, tell us what to do.
Yeah, such respect. Such
Absolutely.
and well deserved. Well
Absolutely.
deserved.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But you're right.
Absolutely.
It is
Yeah.
going to take all of us. And unfortunately, we have two burdens. We have the burden of being Black and brown, and we have the burden of being a woman. And so we
The
have a double,
privilege.
yes, the privilege. Absolutely. You know, my, my husband, he loves to ask me, if you could be anybody else in the world, who would you be? I said, I wouldn't.
I
He's
know that's
like,
right.
and he gets mad at me. He's like, I'm like, I would not. I only want to be
I
me.
know that. The fabulousness that is Kimberly.
Thank you.
Excuse what? Does he know? Do I need to call him and what? Do
No,
you
but
not understand?
but it's funny because when you mentioned about the fake tan, I've had conversations with my white girlfriends or women that I have worked with who have made the comment, "Oh yeah, I'm going on vacation and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna have a tan and we could be sisters." And I'm like, "Okay, first off, don't tell, don't
Well, but wait, but I have okay. I just have to mention this real quick before we're done.
please."
I had a lovely friend, a
Mm-hmm.
lovely friend. She's white, and she was a manicure. She's doing my nails and stuff. Lovely friend, and for a for a white woman, she was always the quote unquote dark one in the family. So this is the whole colorism part of it,
Yeah.
and she was cool, wonderful. But again, this gets to that's like ingrained, kind of like we don't even know it's there, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
One time she was talking to me and she was like so excited. I have Black blood, I'm African, but this is cool. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. All right, okay. So she was talking about her family being, I think, Southern Italy, where they're, browner skin, Italian.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'm a light-skinned woman, Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I think you're if you put our arms together, you're darker than me.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, no, we put our arms together. And I have a little bit of a tan from summertime, but we put our arms together. Like that's the lighter part.
Mm-hmm.
Wintertime. So we put our arms together, and she was darker than me.
Wow.
And she couldn't wrap her head around it. Like, how is that possible? I mean, we are the rainbow people. Like we are all beautiful black, blue, that satiny, really dark, all the way to. I mean, I have relatives on my mom's side just past,
I do
white.
too.
Just what we're the rainbow. But she didn't know what to do with that. She was. I mean, she had to keep looking at it like, well, that's not no. And I was like, no, really. It was like that.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
She was just but how could we call ourselves black? I'm proud to be black, but it's a misnomer in a lot of ways because we're all these wonderful shades within the black, but there's a lot. There's a lot. And I'll end by saying that, I always say, at least for us Americans,
Mm-hmm.
unlike European countries, as an example, where and even the African continent,
Mm-hmm.
it's a continent,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
It's
not a country. It's not one country. It's a continent of lots and lots of countries
and cultures.
Yes.
And different.
Yes.
Yes.
And skin tone.
Yeah, skin tone and hair texture.
Yes. All of that. Mm-hmm.
All that. But so as Europe is, as Africa is, when you go you cross the line you're in a new country.
Mm-hmm.
Other than Canada and Mexico, those of us in the United States of America, we're kind of like out here in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Kind of like by ourselves, in the middle of the ocean. So I say to people, white and black, we've been here a long time. We're a young country still, but we've been here like a few hundred years just together.
Mm-hmm.
We're related now.
That's right.
I don't need to quit. It's like we're all related now.
Exactly.
To the middle of the ocean. Just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Just stop.
And you know what's funny? And so I'm going to end it on this because I think that's hilarious that you two were able to do that. But here's what's funny. Historically, she wouldn't have been able to walk into a nightclub because she couldn't have passed the paper bag test. And that would have probably blown her mind. And my great grandmother told me that when I was a kid because she passed. And
that's a point.
And she said, do you know what the paper bag test is? And we talked about it. And she said, you had to be the paper bag or lighter to be able to go into a nightclub because they didn't allow Black folk to do that.
Or other clubs, other places.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. That's a good point.
And so, it's funny because we worship, and I'm saying this generally speaking, Americans love the exotic. And so we'll say, oh, well, she's Italian, she's Sicilian,
right.
She's that darker skin. I'm like, but you don't understand.
But then here we come.
Right. But you don't understand where the influence comes in to Italy and why you have the darker skin Italians or why you have the darker skin Spaniards.
Mm-hmm.
There are countries around that we could talk about. Portugal.
Why? Absolutely.
Why do you have people, or as I always love to say, and I'm always accused of being Indian, from India. And it's funny because I met a young lady and she said to me, you have a lot of Indian features. I said, I've always been told that. And I said, and it's funny because I can be in a room and y'all are way darker than me, but we'll look at you like I'm on the floor. And, and it really, it is colorism, it is bias, all of those things that we talk about.
And 98 or 99% of humans, well, we're 98 to 99% identical.
Yes.
That 1%, that little 1.5%, not even 0.5%, when it comes to hair texture and those things that we make such a big deal, we're 99% just human, just as a human family, and we're focusing on eye shape and hair texture. I mean, except to celebrate it, we should celebrate all the different wonderful,
Absolutely.
shapes and everything that we come in. But yeah,
Just like
yeah,
God made a rainbow of different types of animals, made
yes,
a rainbow of people.
absolutely, all with value and beauty and all of that. Yeah, that is true.
Thank you, Dr. Angela Celeste May. I knew I came to the right person. But before we go, because I gotta let you talk because you are an author, so you gotta share your
Yes.
books. Tell us where we can get your books.
Oh,
And
thank you.
then I saw, and am I correct? There was a lady, the lady of strings. Was
Oh, that was my sister.
that was your sister? Okay,
That
because
was my sister.
okay, and you can.
Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. And then let's talk about your music briefly before you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, let's work backwards for a second.
Okay.
Because well, you mentioned Lady of Strings. It was
Yeah.
my whole family were all professional musicians, and I'm the youngest of three. So the oldest of us is my sister Michelle, who was on your show when we were first on it. And she's the three of us grew up playing violin and flute, and took piano from my mom. So my brother's in the middle. And then we went in different directions musically. So my brother got into drumming,
Mm,
and played drums for a long time, and church musician, and did gigs, etc. And then he kind of transitioned into percussion and stuff.
okay.
So he plays percussion for me for a long time. And my sister and I, I let her use them, a little borrow them, so she plays for her for certain gigs, depends. um, but we grew up watching my mom. She's a concert pianist and leader of all kinds of. She's a composer and everything. So all three of us have composed and write music. So what you're referring to is we grew up playing flute and violin. Like I said, my brother branched off. He was drumming. I was always going to sing. I was going to sing. And my sister really stayed with the violin and flute. So that's what she does professionally as a musician. And what you saw was for the International Jazz Festival, the
Yes.
Detroit Jazz Festival.
Yes.
She, her own group is called Musique Noire,
Okay.
which is Black music in French.
Mhm.
But what you saw was Sister Strings,
Mhm.
and that was a group that was put together by another fantastic musician lady who sings and everything. And she basically got some of the top musicians from the Detroit area, and all women, drummers and all of that. And so my sister played for that particular group, just for that event, just for that. That's what you were thinking of, but
Yes,
thanks for
I was.
mentioning it. For myself, musically, I continue to play flute, and I picked up viola a few years ago. So I play that recreationally with the Violin Divas that my sister founded. I teach piano, beginning and intermediate piano, and I play flute professionally. And my number one instrument is my voice. I have a degree in voice performance. I've been teaching voice for all levels for a lot of years, my own private studio, including I coach fellow professionals as well, fellow pros. And so I have been blessed. I'm a producer, and my sister and I have been really big on encouraging women, speaking of women, to produce your own material. If you're new to it, even if you collaborate, be a partner in your own music. That is your own voice. Put it forward. A lot of times, that's a whole nother topic. The sexism in the music
I'm
industry.
sure. Mhm.
I've been very blessed to just deal with none of that. Watching my mom, I know how to prayerfully get people around me, and so there's been very few men I've had to beat back, but I don't mind. lovingly. But I've always produced my own stuff. I write it, all of the rest, arrange and everything. So I have 2 albums out under my production company, Celeste Productions, and they both albums were available on CD Baby, and I'm shifting the material now, but you can look them up on Spotify under Dr. Angela Celeste May. You can look them at Reverb Nation, REVERB Nation, and Angela Celeste May, at Amazon, all of that. And so, and also my YouTube channel. Go to my YouTube channel and you'll see a few of my official videos, which I also co-directed and stuff. So I'm enjoying doing music stuff, and I've sung at Carnegie Hall. I've been blessed to do a lot. Been blessed to do a lot musically. So I've got some more exciting things coming up. I have a new music video coming out as well. So you'll see that on YouTube and elsewhere. So there's that. And then there's my book, Freedom. What is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? And I've been encouraged too by a lot of folks to do like an update to this, which I'm thinking I'm definitely going to do. I have more writing to do as well. I've written articles, you know, and done other writings, but in terms of a full book, this particular book, people have said it's really been powerfully, positively impactful for them because it's applicable no matter how you're stuck. You know, relationships, work, whatever. If you're feeling stuck in some way, there's something in here for you. And that's what freedom is about, you know, how to kind of get loose from some of that and personal growth. And what I like about the book is I talk to people from a broad range of backgrounds, ages, race, etc. So I think there's a lot in here that people can glean. And one other thing I'll say about my music too, and thank you for asking, which you always do, I appreciate, is the content of my music. Well, let's back up. On the music side of it, it's multi-layered. So a lot of times what you hear at first, and then you go, and I've had musicians tell me this when they play my, go to perform or play my music, like, did you know this is a 3 against 2 and this is more complicated? I was like, yes, I know, I wrote it, but it's multi-layered. So what you hear, on the surface, there's more going on, musically. I call it urban fusion, a lot of the stuff that I write, even though I'm classically trained as well. I sing like I'm kind of more classical, but also R&B, jazz, all that stuff. So I call it urban fusion, a lot of what I write originally or have thus far, because you'll hear influences of rock and blues and all kinds of stuff like in the same piece. There's lots of influences in there. But lyrically is also multi-layered. So a lot of times I'm saying things on a lot of different levels poetically, and my content is positive, it's encouraging people, but it's also thought-provoking. And one of the songs I did, some of these things I wrote like in the last decade and released on 2 albums, are really apropos for this moment. Okay. Really apropos for this moment. And one of these songs, you got to look it up, it's called Who.
Okay.
And it's who are we today? What do we have to say? Tell the truth, make it real. Anybody dare to deal with who are we today? Why keep pretending to stay alive in this place when you know it's not our real face? They keep pretending all is well. The lies are unending, our reality for sale. So kind of goes, oh yeah, but it's talking about how I had in my head my people, but it's for anyone how everything we've been talking about, our imagery, how it's been used our imagery has been used for sale and to make money off of our image, but it's not always the truth of who we really are. So that's one of those kind of like my little protest song. So and there's some other stuff. The new album has the Detroit Youth Choir on it.
Excellent.
Yes, had before they blew up. I've been on the board of Detroit Youth Choir, had been for a number of years, and had coached them vocally off and on over the years. So I had them on for a song called Listen Up with an exclamation mark. And it's like an open letter to young people. And recorded it a few years ago, released it in 2007 on the album. And right this moment, it's right on time for the protests and telling people to, know who you are. So, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. That was perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, because we need that. So everybody, we got to go look for that song. But tell us quickly how we can reach you. And you told us your YouTube channel. Tell us your website.
Okay. YouTube channel Angela Celeste May. Website is AMA M as in Mary, M-A-Y, May Associates. That's the website for my counseling and consulting and coaching company with my sister Michelle. So you can reach me there. I mentioned Reverb Nation also, so you can / Angela Celeste May. So you can reach me at all those places. You can also email me at Celeste, my middle name, CELESTEMUS, which is short for music and the number 1 at AOL.com. So there's several ways to reach me.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank
You,
you.
Dr. Angela Celeste May. We
Thank
always
you.
enjoy when you come on the show and you give us such good information. Thank you for breaking down the weaponization of Black and brown skin.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
We
you
are
for
going
having
through
me.
a lot. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes. And
So,
everyone vote.
yes,
Vote,
go
vote,
vote. Go
vote,
vote.
vote, vote, vote.
Don't forget, vote.
Yes.
As
Yes.
if your life depends on it,
Depended on it. Yes.
because it does.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Angela Celeste May. We will see you next month, I'm sure, with another engaging topic.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in to the Kim B. Davis Show. I hope you will tune in to our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.